Hey, good morning, everybody. Thank y'all for joining us for our Beef Brunch news update on Tuesday, March 22nd. So we normally record these on Monday, but we're actually recording it Tuesday morning, the same day we're getting it out to y'all. And we were just discussing the storms and the rain and everything that's coming in. So my internet's not the greatest, so you're not going to see me today. You'll just see the guys. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Vince and let him do our update for Central and South Louisiana.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank y'all for having me. We're under the gun this morning with severe thunderstorms, and those storms went through Texas and Oklahoma yesterday with some pretty fierce tornado activity, and they're predicting that here in central part of Louisiana, and we're right in the target. So hopefully, like one of the news forecasters said yesterday, hopefully, only 75% of the people will not experience anything. 25% of the people may. Hopefully it breaks up or does something other than what they're predicting, but hail and strong winds and strong tornadoes up to F2, it's just unthinkable. But in South and Central Louisiana, from our coastal area up to central part of the state, I visit with folks down on the coast that run cattle below the intercoastal regular. They're dry. It's dry. The marshes are dry. They're not getting the grazing that they're needing this time of the year. Fortunately, they're able to do some fence work following hurricanes Laura and Delta that pretty much uplifted all their fencing again since the era of Rita and I'm lost in my train of thought, but they had three major hurricanes after Rita and then two others and then Laura and Delta. So they're having to rebuild all infrastructure and fences and pins and what have you again. And to a large degree, some of those people have moved out of there, but there's some of those people that just make their living by grazing cattle in the marshes of South Louisiana. So, but they're dry and they're able to do those kind of things. Central part of the state, we've got a couple of decent rains over the last, I'm going to say 15 days that have improved our general conditions that gave us some soil moisture. Those who did fertilize and bit the bullet and bought the $700 to $1,000 fertilizer urea top dress, they're getting some good benefit out of it. We're getting a lot of growth in our ryegrass, a lot of clover. Cattle are really flourishing and blooming up with the spring. A lot of calving. Some folks calve in December and January for the most part. A lot of calves being born right now, February, March. A lot of new spring-born calves on the ground right now. So with good grass and lots of milk, things should progress well into the spring. We mentioned fertilizer prices, and we've been talking about this for the last, since the war era, war issues started in Ukraine. Fertilizer prices are still, in the $900 range, give or take, depending on who you're dealing with. Conversation on lime prior to us going on the air. I got a quote on lime here in South Central Louisiana, $46 a ton yesterday. That, like Lee alluded to, that might be a beneficial time to get your pHs in order. So when you do can't afford and want to bite the bullet on buying some of that fertilizer, you're going to get more benefit out of it down the road. So that's a good option. Spring bull sales are pretty much done with, but we do have a Louisiana Brahman Association sales coming up this weekend at Dominic's in Opelousas, where they always have a good offering of F1 Brayford type and also Brangus F1 type cattle that do so well in central and South Louisiana, and that's always a big attraction. And they generally have a few Brahman cattle, a selection of bulls there too. So looking forward to that. That's always a full house, and it pretty much we see a premium there. So these are generally good cattle that are going to be functional for years down the road. With that being said, the market has slipped off a little bit, and I'm sure Jason will cover that. But here locally, we say it time and time again, the better cattle are still bringing good money. Killing cows in the 70s and 80s, good bulls that are yielding constantly over $1 up to $1.20 in some cases. Had one producer told me last week he brought a Charolais bull that he took home $2,500 on a bull that he paid $4,500 for, that he got 6 years of breeding out of. It's a pretty good return on bulls that are yielding. So the better calves are still bringing a fair price at the market. lighter, thinner calves that may need some worming and stuff are taking a pretty good hit because, the buyers are being selective with, they're going to get some rain in the drought-stricken areas, and I think it's too far gone for the wheat situation. But they're concentrating on the heavier calves, which I'm sure Jason and Leo will allude to in their presentation. So with that being said, spring workings are occurring. Get your cattle vaccinated, deworming, seeing some evidence of lice on some of the adult cattle. They'll need some type of topical treatment, for lice. Whatever you choose, just it's time to do it. Cattle starting to rub, and we're seeing some bare spots on their necks and where lice generally show up. Calf workings are currently going on. Get to maximize your dollar, and get your calves castrated, vaccinated. They saying it's going to possibly be another 2014 coming up here shortly, and I hope we see that. So that's about all I have, Ashley.
Thank you, sir. Lee, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you for our Northwest region.
Thank you, Ashley. Very glad to be with y'all today. I'm kind of running a little bit behind as far as things go. We had a kind of late night last night. We got our Master Cattleman class kicked off despite the weather there in Sabine Parish, there in Manny. Good group of cattle producers. It was sure good to see that bunch. Had Dr. Winkhausen come in and talk about forages and forage systems, and boy, what a timely topic. So, but I'm dragging a little bit. It's a pretty good ways from my house down to Manny, and there's no easy way to get there. But anyway, this rain has sure been a benefit. Jack and I were talking before we went on air here, and rainfall amounts in the 3-inch range over our way. I think the farther west you go, you may pick up some 4-5-inch rains. It's very beneficial and it's very needed. The flip side to that is the severe weather, as Vince alluded to. We sure don't want to see that, the tornadoes, the severe thunderstorms, and kind of the havoc that they wreak on infrastructure and on of course on folks' houses and lives and everything like that. I want to take just a minute and just say that our hearts go out to these cattle producers, these folks in Texas. Boy, they've had a rough week. If you're following what's going on in the state of Texas, from wildfires in central and south Texas that burn up quite a bit of property and acreage and lost some cattle in there, and then widespread tornado outbreak last night into the early hours of this morning. So just heart go out to them. It's been a tough week for those folks, and we'll be praying for y'all over that way if there's anybody listening from over that way. I listen back to these news updates sometimes and listen to my segments, and boy, I can sound like I'm being overly negative, I guess, on a lot of stuff, and trying to have a more positive view. And this moisture is a positive. Winter forages look better. We're still behind in my part of the world. Like Vince said, the wheat's going to be kind of not an issue now because it's just too far gone. But the ryegrass looks good. Clover is coming out, especially in the river bottoms over in Red River Valley. Things are looking up. Everybody I talk to, for the most part, their cows are backing off of hay, and it couldn't come quick enough because hay stocks were starting to run low for most producers. But the cattle are backing off of that. Got some folks that are getting these fall-born calves worked, and just observations on the gains. These fall-born calves are starting to turn it on, starting to pick up some gains with this available forage becoming more abundant. Real quick, we've got a busy time coming ahead of us. As I stated, we got this Master Cattleman class kicked off down in Sabine Parish. Also got an AI class coming up here at the Hill Farm, April the 6th through the 8th. Looking forward to that. And also we've got our Beef and Forage Field Day on April the 28th. That's going to be at the Red River Station over there in Bossier City. And you can get in touch with me on any of those, or any one of us on any of those events. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of bragging actually on the Beefmaster Association here in Louisiana Beefmaster Breeders, and they got their sale coming up down at the Kinder Livestock Barn on April the 2nd. And that group, and not showing favoritism on any other breed association in the state, because we've got some really good ones in the state, that Beefmaster group just does a good job. They've holding these sales and getting some quality cattle in there, just kind of energizing the breed in the state. And so kudos to them. You know, it's good to see a breed association really get out there and hustle and try to improve the breed and get a good dispersion throughout the state. So with that, I'm definitely going to quit rambling now, Ashley, and turn it back over to you.
Thank you, sir. Jason, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you for the Northeast region and our markets.
All right, thank you, ma'am. And the moisture is definitely very welcome. The far eastern side of the state, they didn't get a whole lot overnight, but this morning, as that front continues to move from west to east, they've definitely started catching some of that rainfall this morning. We just hope that it'll start turning this ryegrass crop around a little bit to where we can get some much needed yields out of that. I'm going to touch on, before we do look at the markets, I think Lee and Vince have already done a pretty good job of giving a pretty good indication of what our field conditions are. They're pretty uniform across North Louisiana right now. But I just want to touch a little bit and kind of follow up on what Vince was talking about on the importance of making sure that your pH or your soils are correct, and that is spot on. We need to do that. But once we get past that point, if we know that we've done everything we can do to get our soil right, we start putting out fertilizer on these cool season crops out there. The ryegrass is what we're talking about. I've seen a lot of these fields that have got a pretty good amount of winter annual broadleaf pressure in them. A good bit of buttercup, henbit, Carolina geranium, curly dock, several of those cool season annual broadleaves that we battle. I mean, it's nothing new this year, but I think we need just to do our due diligence in terms of making sure that we control those broadleaf plants before we go out there and spend the money that we're going to spend on fertilizer. We know it's going to be high, and we know that those broadleaf plants are heavy nitrogen feeders. So I'll give you some for instances. If you do have clover, like Lee said, our clover is coming on pretty well. I've seen several fields that have got some pretty good crops of white clover coming up in them. Looks really good. If you do have some of that white clover intermingled with your ryegrass, you can use a pint to the acre 2,4-D to help control some of that buttercup and some of those other broadleaves that are coming up. That pint to the acre 2,4-D will cause you a little bit of damage, but it's not going to be anything that you can't live with. Once you get over into some of the other clovers, that pint to the acre may not be an option for you, but on those whites it definitely is. If you don't have any clovers out there in your grazing mix, just a good dicamba 2,4-D mixture, trade names being like Weedmaster or Brash or dicamba amine, any of those products like that at a pint to the acre. If you've got some really mature henbit out there, you may need to go to about 1.5 pints to the acre. Not going to cause you any issues with those ryegrass plantings, but you don't want to use those products if you do have clover intermingled with those, because they are not going to be very forgiving on those clovers. So just pay attention, get out there, scout your fields, walk through them, drive through them, Just check and see what you've got in terms of broadleaf pressure out there before you start going out there and getting ready to start putting some nitrogen fertilizer on these grasses now that we're catching some much needed moisture. As we look at our markets, fundamentals, like we say, continue to remain the same, but volatility and uncertainty are ruling the roost right now. Last week, if you watch some of the wheat market last week, which we've talked on here before about Ukraine's input in terms of wheat into the world market, they are a major player in wheat. And there was talks last week about a ceasefire, and the markets went down the limit. Wheat markets went down the limit a couple of days. They're back up a little bit this morning, but and just talks like that can, I mean, it's just got these markets just bouncing all around. And if you think about our cattle feeders here domestically, they're just having a really hard time in terms of trying to price commodities, and the commodities are up and down and up and down depending on what time of day that you look at them. So it's there's still a lot of volatility, uncertainty in the markets. With our corn and our soybeans still trading up right now, it's still got our feeder cattle a little bit suppressed, but we are seeing some improvement to those as you get out into the out months on our futures. Slaughter for the past week was 644,000 head, which was flat from the previous week, but up from a year ago. So we were at 629,000 head a year ago. Smaller slaughter numbers are probably also propping up our beef market right now, not the cattle market, but the beef market. Those prices are still doing pretty well. The choice box prices firmed at week's end, and cuts were stronger for the week, signaling some improvement in demand. They closed the week. Those choice box beef cutouts closed the week at $257.34, which was up $3.64 from the previous week, with a choice select spread of $7.26, which was up 85 cents from the previous week. And I'll add a caveat here real quick. So a lot of these big packers are releasing their profit statements from 2021. I'm not going to start spitting out numbers, but I encourage you to do your part in educating yourself and just look at what some of these profits, some of these big four packers raked in 2021. And it'll help you maybe understand some of the stuff that we talk about on here on the news update and other news sources that you'll listen to. As reported in the National Weekly Direct Slaughter Cattle Negotiated Purchases on a confirmed 74,899 head for those negotiated purchases. For the week in the Southern Plains, trading was slow to moderate on light demand, and purchases traded steady at 138. In Nebraska, trading was slow to moderate, slow with moderate demand, and live cattle traded mostly steady at 138, with a few up to 141. In the Western Corn Belt, trading was slow on light demand. Live purchases traded $2 higher, from 140 to 142. As we look at our futures market settlements on those live cattle, the front months ended the week with April up $1.02 at 140.50, June up $1.15 at 137.07, and August up 95 cents at 137.60. So as we compare those settlements as they closed out on Friday, compared with the week open, they did pretty much close out steady for the week. 500 to 600 pound steers, medium and large ones and twos, sold between 172 and 175, which is $8 higher at $10 lower when compared to the previous week. 700 to 800 pound feeder steers, medium and large ones and twos, sold between 143 and 148, which was $2 to $20 higher when compared to the previous week. Futures market settlement on that same class in the front months ended the week with April trading $1.22 at 162.32, May up $1.57 at 167.45, and August up $1.40 at 180.70. Our cull cow market continues to be strong. A lot of good, strong demand out there. Prices remain steady as we compare them to the previous week. Lean cull cows, so that, again, that's our body condition score of about a 4 or less. Thin conditioned, end of the week, 71 cents to 80 cents a pound. So these ranges I'm going to give you are going to be an average to a high yielding. So 71 cents a pound on our average yields, 80 cents a pound on our high yielding. Boning utility, body condition score of a 5 to 6, which we call moderate condition, 80 cents to 89 cents a pound. And then breakers, which is body condition score of 7, high condition, 79 cents to 97 cents a pound. As we look at our feedstuff, soybean meals trading down $1.60 at $505.50 a ton. Soybean hulls are steady at $170 a ton. Rice bran steady at $190 a ton. Cottonseed meal steady at $342.50 a ton. Whole cottonseed is up $15 at $340 a ton. Corn gluten feed, the 60% product, is steady at $720 a ton. DDG steady at $307.50 a ton. And corn was down 2 cents a bushel at $7.80 a bushel. And I'll turn it back over to you, Ashley.
Thank you. So just a couple of things on my end. First, I want to echo the sentiments that Lee had earlier about everything going on in Texas, and prayers that it doesn't get that bad here throughout the state. So when I say it literally hit home in Texas for me, it did. There's several tornadoes back home where I'm from. Thankfully, everybody that I know is safe and good, but between all the tornadoes scattered throughout the state, there's still some probably in some bad storms in the Houston, southeast part of the state. The wildfires are north of Brownwood, north of Stephenville, where we've got a lot of cattle, a lot of horses there. So, we've gone through our fair share of disasters here in Louisiana, and they're having a tough time over there as well. So, just continuing prayers and all of that for everyone there, and that today doesn't get that bad here for us. A few other things. So, Lee mentioned the field day at Red River Station for the Northwest region. 1 week prior to that, so Thursday, April 21st, we have our Beef and Forage Field Day at the Dean Lee Research Station there in Alexandria. So registration is going to start at 2 p.m. I think before we had said 2:30, but we have bumped registration up to 2 p.m. And so that we're going to meet at the state evacuation shelter there. So we've got information circling around on that. If you have questions on that one, you can reach out to Vince or myself for that information. And then the other event that we have coming up in April will be April 12th with our webinar for the Beef Brunch Series. There'll be Dr. Christine Navarre coming in. She's doing, I think, animal health more than bugs, drugs, and something else. She has a catchy title for it, and I just forgot what that is. But April 12th at 10:30 a.m. is when Dr. Navarre will go live and do a little bit of herd health talk for us. So again, we hope that you all stay safe. We welcome the rain, but don't welcome any tornadoes or any major disasters coming through this week. So stay safe, enjoy the rain, and we will be back with y'all in 2 weeks.